Hi. Hello, everybody. This is Philip Martin, and this is our weekly on film get together. Um, you know, it's kind of this environment's really strange. It's still we don't have much product going into theaters. Last week we were supposed to get The King of Staten Island actually in the theater, but they pulled it for some reason. I really don't understand the rationale behind that, except maybe, the theaters in Arkansas, their tickets are $5.50 now while this is going on, and I guess if you rent it on or if you buy it on whatever you do, it's like $20 to get it on video on demand, isn't it? So maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. Maybe they figured out that that's a way to make more money. And if so, that's a troubling model going forward, because if you will get people who will pay more to watch a film at home, which I think some people would, just because it's more convenient and it's, we're lazy. I like watching things at home, and I've got a pretty good system downstairs. Then I don't know what the future of theaters really are. I mean, I think they really are going to be consigned to just doing these really big special effects kind of spectacle movies, something like a Dunkirk or something that would go in there. But anyway, I don't know why they pulled The King of Staten Island. It's kind of a interesting question. But we're getting movies. We're getting movies. I'm actually sort of nonplussed right now because because I looked at 7500, and it looks like this gritty kind of grainy film from Eastern Europe with Joseph Gordon-Levitt in it. But then I talked to Piers Marchant, who's actually reviewed it for us this week, and he says it's pretty good. So, I didn't think it would be a very good movie, but it looks like a good movie based on our intelligence. I'm writing about Shirley, which has actually been out a couple weeks on demand, and I think Amazon Prime. Please don't take my word for it. Whenever I mention a streaming service here, please remember that I'm just talking off the cuff, and I might not have it all right. And in a better world, I would go back and correct it. But we did that for the first couple of these videos, and it's pretty labor intensive, so I'm not doing that anymore. We've got our template set up. We'll just talk for a few minutes about what's going on this week, and then we'll get out of there. But Shirley's an interesting film. I think you have to be in the right mood to see it. It's not the kind of Tuesday night, well, let's chill and watch a movie on TV sort of thing. It is more of a, well, I think it helps if you know Shirley Jackson, and you do know Shirley Jackson probably, because probably all of you read The Lottery at some point, whether in junior high or high school, the short story, and you've probably read a couple other stories of hers, and maybe you've read The Haunting of Hill House, and maybe you even are familiar with some, if you're of a certain age, with some of her sort of quasi Irma Bombeck type lifestyle writing, domestic humor, columnist for Good Housekeeping in the 50s. And she wrote a couple of memoirs that were more like Please Don't Eat the Daisies than The Haunting of Hill House. And she died in 1965 when she was only 48 years old. And she's a writer that I've never thought a whole lot about in my life. And part of that is because of the way things are. She wasn't presented to me as somebody I should care too much about, and so I didn't. I mean, but she's a really interesting, writer, and a really interesting female writer as a woman. Some of the topics she takes on are quite. She's known for this gothic horror sort of suspense style, but she's not a genre writer, and you can tell that just from reading a few of her things. She's really much better than that. And this movie, Shirley, which I don't know how much is dramatic license and how much is fictional. I imagine that the story is fictional, And the lifestyle, the milieu in which the story occurs, is probably pretty accurate. But it's by a New Zealander, Josephine Decker, and she's working from a novel I haven't read. But it's a novel. It's not a biography or an autobiography. It's a novel about Shirley Jackson and her life right after she published The Lottery. She was married to this critic who name you might recognize, probably not, named Stanley Hyman. And Hyman taught at Bennington College in Vermont. And after Shirley published The Lottery in the New Yorker, which drew more attention than any story has before or since to that, she got more reader reaction than anything that's ever been published in that magazine has gotten. She became this sort of literary celebrity, and she became the main breadwinner. But they're still living in the college town of Bennington, North Bennington, Vermont. And, he gave her an allowance, and he put her at the table and wanted her to write all the time. And apparently he was quite the philanderer, and he would have affairs with his students. And, I think he was exploitative and maybe cruel. I mean, I don't know these people, so it's hard to say, but yeah, it's like maybe. That's kind of what the Wikipedia sort of biography will tell you anyway. But anyway, into this setting, it's late 1948. She's published The Lottery. She is now this rising star in literary circles. Come a young faculty couple. He's a young instructor, and she's a faculty wife. And for convenience for everybody, they end up living with Shirley and Stanley, and it becomes this sort of get the guest. Guess who's coming to dinner sort of dynamic between them, and there's these alliances that form and dissolve, and then they, the couples are aligned against each other couple, and then the women are aligned against the men, and then the men are, you get the picture. And it's quite an interesting film if you're ready to stick with it, and kind of, I don't know how it would work if you just accepted it as like a story that you came into not knowing anything. I don't know how it would play, and I think it might play a little bit better even if I was somebody who really knew who Shirley Jackson was and was really familiar with her work, because obviously there's a lot of doubling that goes on in this, and that the young woman, in some ways, her character is a reflection of Shirley's character, and Shirley's, projecting back onto her, and the way the story unfolds, because there is a mystery within the story about a young college student who has disappeared. I think that it would even be richer if I knew more about it. But we all have the tools we have, and my tool is that I can read about this stuff. So, but Shirley's interesting. It's if I'd had more time, I might have made it our lead piece this week, because it's just the interesting behind-the-scenes stuff. Okay. One of the big movies this week, or at least I think the movie that's going to get the most attention, is the Kevin Bacon, Amanda Seyfried movie, You Should Have Left, which is a Blumhouse horror film, which promises on a couple of levels to be better than just your average run-of-the-mill horror movie that's released in February or as counter-programming to one of the big, movies that come out periodically through the year. It's probably pretty cheap to film it, but it's got Kevin Bacon, who I respect, and who couldn't get me a screener of it, even though I reached out to him through a friend of a friend. Anyway, it's the big movie, but we don't have a review of it. And the reason we don't have a review is because Blumhouse / Universal, or whoever is calling the shots on this, on the publicity, is only making the screeners available at 4 o'clock our time Wednesday, which is too late for us because we still operate in the same way that a daily newspaper operates, even though our product is now primarily on your iPad. We still have the deadlines and stuff that a day, so we have to print these things, and we print a number of copies every. So I can't just go in Wednesday night and put something in the newspaper. We have to have it before then. But we live with what we've got, so we don't have a review of it, and we probably won't have a review of it because even though it's the big commercial movie of the week, it's probably not going to be something that we're talking about next week at this time. You see what I'm saying? Whereas Shirley actually was released on June 5th. And normally, if we don't review something the day it comes out or the day after it comes out, we tend not to review it. Or special occasions, we would review something that opened and do it, but only once or twice over the past 10 years have we done that. But in this new environment, I've decided, moi, the editor of the section, has decided that we don't really have to pay attention to all that because a movie is new when it comes to you. It doesn't. We're not going to really tie ourselves to opening days and try to get things in advance all the time. I think that it's better to try to identify what's good out there and what is important out there and what is driving the conversation. And that's why I think that it's okay to actually come to Shirley a couple of weeks after it's opened and write about it. I think it's okay not to chase that. We're still going to try to get something in the paper on the opening day, like we did with the Five Gloves last week. And with the King of Staten Island. We're going to still try to do that. But it doesn't strike me as terribly important whether we get it in the week of, the week before, the week after. As long as it's a film that people are talking about. And I don't get a whole lot of feedback about things like this, so I'd really invite you, if you have thoughts about this, to either email me, send me a direct tweet at BorkDog. Back there, you can see that's my Twitter handle, which you're supposed to be already, have followed me because we need followers. That's just the way it is these days. And let me know what you think about it. I mean, if you think that we're doing it right, great. If you think we're doing it wrong, well, then give me some rationale for why we should do it differently. I really don't like dealing with publicists because I don't see my job as having to deal with publicists. I see my job as writing about this stuff, really. I mean, I don't even really think I ought to be editing as much as I do. My highest and best use, I believe, is sitting at a keyboard all by myself and thinking about stuff and trying to get that in some form where you guys can communicate to try to have a conversation with you guys about that. So, but we're going to use all the tools we have. So here we are on video. You can leave me messages. You can send me email. You can send me tweets. You can send me Facebook messages. I don't mind. But any feedback would be, welcome, and all voices will be heard. What else we get? Well, I haven't even done the home movies yet. Have to get that. Have to get to the home movies part. I don't know what's out. Happy Juneteenth, by the way. If you're looking for something to watch on home video this weekend, I think the Watchmen series was released on DVD last week, and that's stick with that because I am only a moderate fan of the Alan Moore, graphic novel from the 80s. I mean, I've read it and I've got it, and I can go back and refer to it. But the HBO series is a totally different animal. In fact, I had a little bit of a discussion with someone on Facebook who objected to the series on the grounds that, Alan Moore didn't want his characters used in this. And, I understand that from a creator's point of view. I understand that you want to keep this proprietary interest and nobody should mess with your stuff unless you say it's okay to mess with your stuff. But they're not really messing with his stuff in this. It's really the Alan Moore Watchmen is sort of like the mythology for this in this other universe. It's a mythology. It's stories that these people know and are aware of, and it's a mix of history and mythology, I guess, because some of these things actually happened. So, I guess all of them actually happened, but maybe not in the way that they were presented in the in Moore's original book. So I have no problem with Watchmen as a as a subsidiary product of the Watchmen comic. Okay, other people may, but other people care way more about that stuff than I do. I'm sorry, I don't. But it's not your standard, superhero thing like you might have been led to believe, and it's not your standard new mythology either. It's a really interesting show that sort of interrogates where we are and the United States' original sin of slavery and subjugation of various peoples throughout our history. I don't say that as it's not something that's going to make you feel guilty. It's just if you don't know about the Greenwood, I don't want to call it riot, and the Greenwood massacre, I guess, in Tulsa 99 years ago, which you've probably heard about in light of the current president's speech in Tulsa this weekend. You really should watch this. It's dramatized in this, and it brings it home in a way that feels, like the movies can sometimes feel, like more real than real, in that you internalize it. I want to go back to Shirley, because the way Shirley comes at you, it feels almost like something you lived through as a small child. The way the director accomplishes that is fairly interesting to me. I mean, I think that she might have read the graphic novel of Lottery, which was actually drawn by Shirley Jackson's grandson, Miles Hyman, who's done a number of graphic novels. And in the preface of that, he talks about how he saw his grandmother. He had only one clear memory of his grandmother, who died when he was 3 and she was 48. And she was sitting in the kitchen, framed by the light, sitting on a stool or a chair with a cigarette and I think a glass of bourbon. And she was talking to somebody, but he didn't really connect who she was talking to or what she was saying. And that's sort of the way the movie sort of is made up of these kind of moments, these sort of oblique moments where you see people through keyholes and through parted curtains and panes of glass, and it almost feels like a memory. And I didn't talk about this in my review, but I could have if I'd had more time and they'd paid me more. I would have maybe connected it to Roma, and maybe even to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as a kind of memory play. But it's a kind of memory play constructed of someone else's memories. And it's really remarkable for me that this director, Decker, who we're talking to, and that will run next week. Dan Liebarger is on that case. In fact, I need Dan to see this, so he will respond to this in his piece. We're talking to her next week. So it'll be interesting to see how she pieced that together. Because like I said, she's working from a novel that, again, I haven't read, that is working with the real stuff of Shirley Jackson's life. So, and Watchmen is not too different, though it is working with totally fictional, made-up people, we have some of the same strategies going on there. It's like nonfiction fiction or something, So it's metafiction, is what it is. But we don't want to get into we don't want to be saying meta a lot on a video like this, I think. Anyway, so we've got that. What else have we gotten this week? This week we have 7500, which, like I said, surprised me. Pierce tells me it's good. We've got Shirley. We've got Dan Liebarger talking with Kevin Wilmot, who is Spike Lee's collaborator and co-writer, and worked with him on The Five Bloods. We've got that. We have a wire piece about Kevin Bacon. If that doesn't get in, it means because we got enough other stuff. You know, I mean, sort of like, I don't like using a lot of wire in our newspaper. I have always thought that the whole reason to do this yourself was to do it yourself. And I like commissioning and scouting and finding and doing this stuff ourselves. We are not equipped to do some kinds of stuff. We don't do a lot of gossip stuff. We don't do a lot of big star profiles because other people are better equipped to that. We're not equipped for that geographically or resource-wise. We're not going to fly someone to Los Angeles to spend 15 minutes with a Matthew McConaughey, for instance. We're not going to do that. But we can get on the phone and talk to somebody who works behind the camera because they want to talk to us and because they have interesting things to say. And so we're doing that, and we're going to continue to do that, even though these times have stressed everybody and have stressed, newspapers, which have not been in a great place for the last 40 years anyway. So we'll just keep on doing it until they tell us we can't do it. And I appreciate all you guys watching this. I really get a big kick out of people who appreciate movie style, because we do a good product, and it is much better than most newspaper movie sections, which don't even exist anymore. I mean, it's just us punching out here in the middle of the South, the southern Midwest. And you guys are part of it. There's no dog this week. I tried to get Karen Martin up here to talk about. Maybe we'll do a sort of podcast sometime about how movie style all came to be back in the back 20 years ago, 21 years ago, or so, 22 years ago. Wow. Maybe we can get her up here to talk about that at some point. But for now, we've talked long enough. We will see you later, and take care. Stay safe. Don't touch your face. And we'll see you at the movies sooner or later.